Is your trusty pruning shear a magic wand in autumn, or a weapon of mass destruction for your garden? One wrong snip, and instead of a glorious spring bloom, you might find yourself staring at bare, lifeless branches. Today, we're going to transform you from an amateur garden surgeon into a seasoned master of autumn pruning. And I promise, you'll discover a secret that will make you look at your trees and shrubs with a whole new perspective. So why autumn? Imagine your garden as a vast, sleepy kingdom. Plants have slowed all their processes, settling in for their winter slumber. At this point, pruning isn't a shock to them. It's more like a planned, gentle surgery under anaesthesia. They feel almost no stress and lose very little of their precious sap. Proper autumn trimming isn't just about aesthetics. It's the foundation for vibrant health and an abundant harvest next year. It's our chance to help your garden enter its dormant period strong, resilient, and ready for spring. So let's dig a little deeper. Why bother with pruning shears in autumn, when nature seems to be heading into hibernation? Well, as a matter of fact, fall pruning serves three incredibly important purposes. Imagine you're a personal trainer and a doctor for your garden, all rolled into one. The first and foremost purpose is health. This is what we call sanitation pruning. Like diligent doctors, we remove anything that could potentially harm the plant. Any dead, broken, or diseased branches need to go. Why? Because they serve as cozy winter homes for fungal spores and pest larvae. By leaving them, we're essentially creating a breeding ground for problems come spring. By removing them now, we're giving our garden a thorough, deep clean. The second purpose is proper shape and structure. We're shaping the canopy of the tree or shrub, and this isn't just for aesthetics. A well-formed canopy guarantees good air circulation and sunlight exposure. When branches aren't competing for space or shading each other out, the plant receives maximum sun and air, which is the best way to prevent many diseases. And finally, the third and perhaps most rewarding purpose, your future harvest. By removing old, weak branches, we're essentially telling the plant, don't waste your energy here. Direct all your strength into growing strong, fruit-bearing shoots. It's a direct investment in the quantity and quality of your next season's apples and berries. So, fall pruning isn't just about tidying up. It's a smart strategy for a truly thriving garden. Let's talk more about corrective pruning. Imagine yourself as a surgeon and your garden as a patient preparing for a long period of dormancy. Your primary goal is to remove anything that could cause problems. This is the cornerstone of your garden's health. What are we looking for first? Dry, broken, and diseased branches. Dry branches are dead weight. They're not just unsightly. They can also become breeding grounds for fungi and pests. They're easy to spot. Brittle, lifeless, often greyish in colour, and snapping easily with a distinctive crack. Broken branches are open invitations for infection. Wind, snow, and frost can all worsen the damage. Moisture can penetrate the trunk through these breaks, freezing in winter and literally tearing the wood from the inside out. That's why any crack or snap, no matter how small, needs to be addressed. And of course, diseased branches. Look for any abnormalities, growths, swellings, bark spots, or cankers that might be oozing sap. All these are clear signs of disease. Leaving such a branch over winter allows the infection to survive, only to launch a renewed attack on healthy parts of the plant in spring. Corrective pruning isn't an act of cruelty, it's a vital, life-saving operation. All right, we've dealt with the initial cleanup. Our trees are healthy and clean now, but what's next? Now we transition from doctors to designers, becoming stylists and architects for our trees. This is what we call thinning pruning. Imagine your tree's canopy as a really dense, overgrown hairstyle. The hair is tangled, it can't breathe, and it looks messy. The same principle applies to the branches. Our goal now is to create space within the canopy. We're looking for branches that behave like true egoists. First, those growing inwards, not outwards towards the sun. They create shade, hinder air circulation, and will never produce good fruit anyway. These we remove without hesitation. Second, we look for branches that cross or, even worse, rub against each other. Constant friction in the wind creates wounds on them, and any wound is an open door for diseases. Of two rubbing branches, we keep the stronger, better positioned one. Our ultimate goal is for the canopy to be light-filled and well ventilated. Old-time gardeners often say a sparrow should be able to fly freely through the canopy of a mature apple tree, and that's no exaggeration. This transparent structure allows sunlight to reach every single fruit and prevents fungal diseases from taking hold. Okay, we've covered what to prune and why. But the biggest question that plagues every gardener is when exactly to start. Rush it, and you risk damage. Wait too long, and you do the same. It's a classic case of timing is everything. The primary cue from the garden itself is leaf drop. As long as leaves remain on a tree, it's still actively working, photosynthesizing. All the nutrients stored up during the summer are slowly transferring from the leaves down into the branches and roots. This process builds its vital energy reserves for winter. If you begin pruning while leaves are still present, you'd literally be cutting off this crucial nutrient flow, significantly weakening the tree just before the long winter. So, the golden rule is this: wait until most of the foliage has naturally fallen. This indicates that sap flow has slowed, and the plant is preparing for dormancy. It's essentially going to sleep. However, there's also the other extreme. Don't wait too long. All pruning should be completed before severe, consistent frosts set in. Once temperatures consistently dip below -5 degrees Celsius, and especially -10, the wood becomes incredibly brittle, almost like glass. Your sharp pruners, instead of making a clean cut, might actually snap the branch, leaving a jagged, slow-healing wound. Such a wound would remain exposed to frost and potential infections throughout the entire winter. So remember this ideal window: after the leaves have fallen, but before deep frosts arrive. This gives you several weeks to work calmly and unhurriedly in the garden. Now pay close attention. This is arguably the most important section. For some plants, full pruning isn't just unhelpful, it can be a death sentence. So, which plants should you absolutely leave alone until spring? First on this no prune list are your spring flowering shrubs. Remember this simple rule: anything that blooms profusely in spring and early summer should not be pruned in the fall. Think lilacs, forsythia, weigela, grefsheim, spirea, and many more. Why? The reason is quite simple. These plants develop next year's flower buds on last year's wood, typically during the summer. Right now, tiny buds for next spring's blooms are already set and waiting dormant on their branches. If you grab your pruners and decide to tidy things up, you'll literally be cutting away next spring's spectacular display. The ideal time to prune them is right after they finish blooming, giving them ample time to grow new shoots and set next year's flower buds on that new growth. Next on our list are stone fruit trees like cherries, plums, and apricots. They tolerate fall pruning very poorly, especially in regions with cold winters. Their wounds heal slowly, making them highly susceptible to fungal spores and subsequent diseases. Furthermore, pruning cuts often lead to gummosis, a condition where the tree essentially bleeds sap, losing valuable vigour and nutrients. The best time to prune these is in early spring, just before the sap begins to rise. Let's talk about your trusty companions. Your garden tools. Your pruners, loppers, and saw aren't just pieces of metal. They're surgical instruments, and the health of your plants depends on their condition. There are two golden rules: perfect sharpness and sterile cleanliness. Why is sharpness so crucial? Imagine cutting bread. A sharp knife makes a smooth, clean cut, while a dull one just crushes and tears the crumb. The same principle applies to branches. A sharp pruner leaves a smooth, clean cut that quickly heals over with callus. A plant tissue similar to our own skin. A dull tool, however, doesn't cut. It crushes, frays, and tears the wood fibres. It leaves behind a jagged, ragged wound. Such a cut takes longer to heal, remaining susceptible to moisture and rot. This creates an open invitation for all kinds of infections and pests, and cleanliness is your shield. against the spread of diseases. Moving from one tree to another with dirty tools, you can easily become a carrier of infection. Imagine pruning a branch on a diseased apple tree, then immediately moving to a healthy one with the same uncleaned pruners. You've just transferred fungal spores or bacteria. It's like a doctor using the same syringe for all their patients. Therefore, sharpness and cleanliness aren't just a perfectionist whim. They are the foundation of your garden's safety. So, we've established that tools need to be clean. But how do we achieve that cleanliness? Simply shaking off the dirt isn't enough. What we need is proper disinfection. It's a quick and simple process that will save your trees from a host of diseases. The most accessible and effective method is to use alcohol or alcohol-based liquids. Rubbing alcohol works, cheap vodka, even the alcohol-based hand sanitizers that everyone has these days. Simply dampen a cloth or cotton pad and thoroughly wipe down the blades of your pruners, loppers, or saw. Alcohol is excellent at killing most bacteria and fungal spores. What's crucial? This procedure shouldn't be done just once at the start of your work, but regularly. Ideally, after every single tree. If you know a tree is diseased, then disinfection afterward is absolutely essential. This should become second nature to you. Trim a few branches from an old apple tree, wipe your pruners, then move on to a young pear tree. It only takes 10-15 seconds, but the benefits are immense. If you don't have alcohol on hand, you can use other methods. For example, a strong, dark pink solution of potassium permanganate, or even regular chlorine bleach, diluted with water at a 1:10 ratio. However, after using these, you must wipe the blades dry to prevent rust. Remember, a clean tool is your guarantee that you're healing your garden, not infecting it. We've prepared our tools and selected the branch. Now for the most crucial part, making the cut itself. This seemingly small action determines how quickly the wound heals and how the plant will continue to grow. There's a golden rule of pruning, and it has two main parts, the right location and the correct angle. The first part is the collar cut. If you're removing an entire branch, look closely at its base where it joins the trunk or a larger branch. You'll notice a slight swelling or collar of bark there. This is what we call the branch collar. This collar contains specialized cells responsible for wound healing. Your goal is to make the cut precisely along the outer edge of this collar, avoiding leaving a stub, but also not cutting into the collar itself. Leaving a stub will cause it to die back and rot, potentially creating a hollow or entry point for disease. Cutting too deeply, damaging the collar, will result in a much larger wound that takes longer to heal. The second part is the bud cut. If you're not removing an entire branch but simply shortening it, the cut should be made above a bud. Specifically, choose a bud that faces the direction you want new growth to go, typically outwards from the plant's canopy. The cut should be angled, sloping slightly away from the bud. The lowest point of the cut should be roughly level with the bud's base, while the highest point should be a few millimeters above it. This angle prevents water from pooling on the cut surface and on the bud itself, which helps prevent rot and disease. Mastering these two simple techniques will make you a true pro at pruning. Alright, let's get down to the actual cut. This is where theory meets practice, and your precision here can make all the difference. Every detail truly matters. There are two primary types of cuts, and once you master them, you'll understand the logic behind the entire pruning process. The first type of cut involves removing an entire branch right at its base. Look closely at where the branch connects to the trunk. You'll see a slight swelling or ridge of bark. This is what gardeners call the branch collar. This area is actually the tree's natural healing zone. Your goal is to make your cut precisely along the outer edge of this collar. Think of it like cutting a shirt sleeve right along the shoulder seam. Never leave a stub. A stub will die back, rot, and become an entry point for diseases and pests. But on the other hand, don't cut too deep into the trunk, removing the collar entirely. This will create a large, gaping wound that the tree will struggle immensely to heal. The second type of cut is when you're simply shortening a branch. This is often called pruning to a bud. Select a healthy bud that is facing the direction you want new growth to go, usually outwards from the main canopy. This is where your new shoot will emerge in the spring. The cut itself should be a clean, angled slice, roughly at a 45-degree angle. It should start slightly below the base of the bud, on the opposite side of the branch, and then angle upwards, finishing a few millimeters above the bud's tip. This creates a small sloping roof or shield over the bud. This precise angle is crucial because it prevents rainwater from pooling on the cut surface and on the bud, thereby protecting it from rot and disease. It's a simple technique but incredibly effective. Let's break this down with a practical example. Consider the apple tree, often called the queen of our gardens. It's a prime candidate for fall pruning and handles it exceptionally well. So, what are we looking for on an apple tree first? Naturally, we're removing anything dry, diseased or broken. We've covered that already, but apple trees also have their own unique problem areas that require attention. The most critical issue is often water sprouts. These are those vigorous, thick, rapidly growing vertical shoots. They often emerge from dormant buds on older branches resembling long green whips. While newcomers might mistake them for a sign of the tree's vitality and health, they are in fact true parasites. Water sprouts rarely, if ever, produce fruit. Instead, they aggressively draw vital sap and nutrients away from the productive, fruit-bearing branches. Moreover, they significantly overcrowd the tree's canopy, casting dense shade and impeding proper air circulation. Fall is the perfect season to tackle them. We remove them cleanly, cutting them to the collar, right at the base, ensuring no stubs are left behind. Another area to focus on is branches growing at an overly acute angle to the main trunk. Down the line, under the weight of a heavy harvest, such a branch is highly prone to breaking off, potentially creating a large, damaging wound. It's far better to remove these now while they're still young, or to strategically prune them to encourage growth towards a more horizontally oriented, stronger lateral branch. An apple tree correctly pruned in the fall ensures that come spring, it will channel all its energy not into producing useless vegetative growth, but directly into forming abundant flower buds and developing a bountiful crop of future apples. But now, let's shift our focus. While apple trees are relatively straightforward, stone fruit varieties like cherries, plums and apricots are far more complex. For these, autumn pruning is truly playing with fire. It often does more harm than good, especially in regions with harsh winters. So what exactly is the problem? Stone fruit trees have a peculiar vulnerability. They're incredibly sensitive to frost, and their wounds heal much slower than those of apples or pears. An autumn cut leaves an open wound exposed to winter's harsh conditions. This allows frost to severely dehydrate the wood, making it a perfect entry point for fungal spores, particularly those of dangerous moniliosis, once spring arrives. Beyond that, stone fruits are prone to gummosis, a condition where they exude sticky resin. You've likely seen amber-like drops of hardened sap on cherry and plum tree trunks. This is the tree's natural defense mechanism against injury. Unfortunately, autumn pruning is a common trigger for this process. Instead of channeling its energy into preparing for winter, the tree expends vital resources trying to heal these wounds. Therefore, the general rule for stone fruits is clear. In autumn, limit pruning strictly to essential sanitary cuts. If you spot a clearly broken or diseased branch that certainly won't make it through winter, it's fine to carefully remove it. However, any shaping, structural, or rejuvenation pruning is best postponed until early spring. That's when the tree is still dormant, but the threat of severe frost has safely passed. Let's set aside the trees for a moment and move down a level to berry bushes. Here, autumn pruning isn't just recommended, it's absolutely essential. Take two of the most popular residents of our gardens, currants and gooseberries. For them, a good autumn trim is the key to their youthfulness and abundant harvests. The core idea here is the continuous rejuvenation of the bush. The truth is, both black currants and gooseberries bear their primary crop on branches that are 2, 3, and 4 years old. Older branches become much less productive. Their berries grow smaller, and the branches themselves only crowd the bush and become breeding grounds for diseases. How can you tell them apart? older branches are noticeably thicker, covered in dark, almost black, cracked bark, often with lichens. Young shoots, on the other hand, are lighter in colour, smooth and flexible. Our task each year is to cut out 2 to 3 of the oldest branches right at their base, close to the ground. Don't hesitate. By doing this, you signal the bush to send up strong new basal shoots directly from the roots. We also remove all weak, thin twigs that are lying on the ground or growing inward towards the centre of the bush. Ideally, a mature, properly shaped currant or gooseberry bush should consist of 12-15 branches of varying ages. This ensures consistent, generous harvests for years to come. Raspberries, you see, are the true aristocrats of the berry patch, and they demand a very particular approach. If you try to prune them the same way you would currants, you risk losing your entire harvest. The most crucial thing to understand about raspberries is that their canes have a 2-year lifespan. In their first year, young canes grow vigorously, gather strength, and survive the winter. In their second year, they bear fruit, giving us all those delicious berries, and then their life's mission is complete. By autumn, the cane starts to dry out and will produce no berries the following year. It will simply stand there, taking up valuable space, shading out new growth, and providing a haven for pests and diseases. This is why our autumn task for regular, non-ever-bearing raspberries is quite simple. Prune back to the ground, leaving no stumps or canes that have fruited this year. How can you tell them apart? Typically, they are darker, woody, somewhat dry and brittle. You might also spot remnants of the fruit-bearing laterals. In contrast, the young canes that will bear fruit next year are usually bright green or light brown, flexible and smooth. Once the old canes are removed, we thin out the young growth, leaving 8-10 of the strongest canes per metre of row. This ensures they receive ample sunlight and nutrients. For ever-bearing or full-fruiting raspberries, things are even simpler. If your goal is a single but very abundant autumn harvest, you can simply cut all the canes down to ground level in late autumn. Now let's talk about the undisputed queen of the garden, the rose. When it comes to autumn rose pruning, there's so much conflicting advice and so many myths circulating that a beginner gardener can easily feel utterly lost. The biggest myth you'll often hear is, to ensure your rose survives winter, you must cut it back very severely, almost to the ground. This couldn't be further from the truth. It's actually one of the most dangerous mistakes you can make. In reality, how much you prune your rose in autumn depends on 2 key factors: its specific type and your chosen winter protection method. Overly severe, short pruning can weaken the entire plant and even trigger new bud growth, especially if autumn is mild and extended. These tender new shoots will inevitably perish with the first hard frosts. So, as a general rule, autumn rose pruning is primarily for sanitation. We remove all immature, soft or reddish shoots. These won't survive the winter anyway. Instead, they'll simply rot under their winter cover, creating a breeding ground for disease. Also remove any remaining leaves, diseased or weak branches, and any shoots growing inward towards the centre of the plant. As for the main shaping prune, we base that on the height of our winter protection. If you're using boughs or hilling soil around the base, then it's sufficient to shorten the shoots to about 40-50 centimetres, 16-20 inches. If you have a framed winter structure, you can leave them longer. The primary goal of autumn rose pruning isn't to shape the plant for the future, but rather to prepare it for a comfortable winter. This means removing anything superfluous that could hinder its survival or become diseased under its winter covering. The real beauty trim, or formative pruning, we'll save for spring. Now, onto ornamental shrubs. With these, a common mistake in fall pruning can cost you an entire season of blooms, and the perfect example of such a finicky plant is the hydrangea. Just saying pruning hydrangeas is as broad as saying treating people. You always need to specify the exact type you're talking about, because the approaches to them are fundamentally different. Let's take, for example, 2 of the most popular types: panicle, Hydrangea paniculata, and smooth, Hydrangea arborescens. For these varieties, it's straightforward. They bloom on new wood, meaning the growth from the current year. This means their flower buds form in spring on the branches that will grow during the new season. Therefore, you can, and should, prune them in the fall. We remove all spent flower heads to prevent them from weighing down branches and causing breakage under heavy snow. We also conduct a clean-up prune, removing any weak or thin shoots. Then, in spring, you can perform a more significant shaping prune. This will stimulate the growth of robust new shoots, leading to those magnificent, massive flower heads. Now, with big leaf hydrangea macrophylla, the one famous for its blue, pink and purple mop head or lace cap blooms, it's a completely different story. This one is a bit of a diva when it comes to pruning. This species blooms on old wood, meaning the growth from the previous year. This means the flower buds, which will burst forth next summer, are already set on the branches right now, typically in their upper sections. If you prune these stems in the fall, you'll simply be cutting off all your future flowers. So, for big leaf hydrangeas, in the fall, you should only ever remove spent flower heads, and do so very carefully, cutting just above the first pair of healthy buds. Our primary goal for winter isn't pruning, but rather protecting these delicate shoots from harsh frost. Let's move on to the perennial beds. What should we do with these plants? Should we cut them back completely to the ground, or is it better to leave them until spring? Just like with shrubs, there's no single answer that applies to all perennials. It all depends on the specific plant species. Most herbaceous perennials like hostas, daylilies, peonies, phlox, and asters should indeed be cut back in the fall. After the first frosts, their foliage and stems lose their aesthetic appeal, collapse, and begin to rot. This decaying plant material provides an ideal hiding place for slugs and rodents, and can become a breeding ground for fungal diseases. Removing it essentially gives your flower beds a thorough clean-up and significantly improves their appearance. When pruning, leave short stubs, about 5 to 10 centimetres, 2 to 4 inches high. This helps you easily locate the plant in spring. However, there's another category of plants that are best left untouched during autumn. This includes ornamental grasses like miscanthus or fescue, as well as plants with hollow stems, such as echinacea or rudbeckia. Their dried stems and seed heads not only provide stunning visual interest in the winter garden, especially when covered in frost or snow, but they also serve several vital functions. They act as natural snow catchers, helping to insulate the root system by trapping snow, which provides a crucial protective layer against freezing temperatures. Furthermore, their hollow stems can provide a safe haven for beneficial insects to overwinter. For these reasons, we can confidently leave these plants standing throughout winter and only cut them back in early spring, just before new growth begins. Now let's talk about the gardener's mindset. We'll start with the most common beginner's mistake, one made with the best of intentions, and that's pruning too early. It feels so good on a warm September day to work in the garden, tidy things up, and trim everything back. But for your plants, it can be a real disaster. Imagine your tree or shrub isn't ready to go dormant yet. It's experiencing what's known as a second flush of growth. And then you grab your secateurs and start aggressively trimming it back. What signal are you sending it? It doesn't interpret this as preparation for winter, but as a summer trim meant to stimulate new growth. And it obligingly starts to push out dormant buds. Come October or even November, your plant will be covered in young, tender green leaves and shoots. It might look sweet, but it's essentially a death sentence. These shoots won't have time to mature. Their wood won't harden off before the cold weather hits. The first serious frost will kill them. But the problem isn't just that. On this unnecessary growth, the plant squandered precious energy and nutrients it should have been storing in its roots and trunk for a successful winter. It enters winter weakened, depleted, and with frost-damaged wounds where those tender new shoots once were. So remember this golden rule. Don't rush. Let your garden tell you when autumn has truly arrived, and only then should you reach for your secateurs. Let's move on to mistake number 2. Unfortunately, this isn't just a beginner's error. Even some seasoned gardeners make it. I call it the hard prune or cutting back to the ground. This happens when, in an attempt to make winter easier for the plant, it's cut back too drastically, leaving only short stumps. Roses, hydrangeas, and other ornamental shrubs are particularly susceptible to this. It might seem logical. Less above ground means it's easier to cover and there's less chance of winter damage. But in reality, the exact opposite happens. Firstly, such a radical cutback is a huge stressor for the plant. It loses a large portion of the nutrients stored in its shoots. Secondly, and most importantly, very few healthy live buds remain on those short stumps. These are precisely where new growth should emerge in spring. If winter is harsh, with thaws followed by severe freezes, those few remaining buds can easily die off. Then in spring, the plant will have nothing to recover from. It will either die completely or take a very long time to weakly regrow from the crown. Therefore, remember, autumn pruning isn't about total eradication, but moderate correction. Always leave enough shoot height with a good reserve of viable buds. It's better to remove what has frozen back in spring than to cut off in autumn what could have survived and produced vigorous growth. So, we've made a good, clean cut. But do we need to seal it with something? There's just as much debate surrounding tree wound sealers and other dressings as there is around pruning itself. Some gardeners say sealing is essential, while others claim it's an outdated practice and even harmful. As often is the case, the truth lies somewhere in the middle. Let's break it down. What exactly is the purpose of a wound sealer? Its main goal is to protect the open wound from drying out, from moisture, and from pathogenic microorganisms. However, there are some important distinctions. If you've cut a small twig or branch, less than 1 to 2 centimeters in diameter, a healthy tree will heal perfectly fine on its own. The wound will close up very quickly, and no sealer is needed. In fact, a thick layer of sealant on a small cut can create a greenhouse effect and encourage rot. However, if you've removed a larger branch, and the cut diameter is more than, say, 2 to 3 centimeters across, then assistance is indeed needed. Such a large cut will take a long time to heal, and it needs protection. With what? Classic tree wound putty or tar isn't always the best choice, especially in autumn. In cold weather, it hardens, cracks, and doesn't adhere well. It's much better to use modern balms or pastes with fungicides, which not only mechanically seal the wound, but also disinfect it. They are elastic, don't crack in freezing temperatures, and adhere effectively. Apply the sealant in a thin layer immediately after the cut onto a dry surface. It's like putting a bandage on a large wound, a simple action that can help prevent major problems down the line. Well, we've just finished pruning, and now we're faced with a mountain of branches. The big question is, what do we do with all this? The easiest and most common solution that often comes to mind is to simply burn it all in a bonfire. It's a quick and efficient way to get rid of plant waste, especially if you spotted any signs of diseases or pests. Fire will effectively destroy all fungal spores and larvae. But hold on a minute before you light that match. Healthy branches are actually a valuable resource for your garden. If you're lucky enough to own a garden shredder, you can turn those branches into excellent mulch. This can then be used to insulate strawberry beds, protect the bases of trees, or cover perennial plants over winter. Not only will this mulch shield the soil from freezing and drying out, but over time, it will decompose, enriching your soil with vital organic matter. Even the thicker branches that your shredder can't handle still have a purpose. You can cut them into manageable pieces and use them at the base of your raised beds or hugel beds for the next growing season. They'll act as a long-lasting drainage layer and a slow-release source of nutrients for your plants. Plus, more creative gardeners often repurpose attractive branches into natural supports for climbing plants or use them as unique decorative elements throughout their garden. So, before you even think about lighting that bonfire, pause and consider this. That pile of branches might not be waste at all, but rather a valuable resource that can still be put to great use in your garden. And now, for the moment that truly changes everything. Most people think pruning is all about removing things, getting rid of the excess, the old, or the diseased. But the real secret of autumn pruning isn't what you snip, but why you're doing it. You're not just taking away a branch, you're redirecting the plant's energy. Each cut is your direct instruction to the tree or shrub, essentially telling it, don't waste energy here anymore. Instead, channel all your strength into this bud come spring. You're not an executioner, but a conductor, guiding its future growth, blooms and fruit. And when you start seeing a branch not as something to be removed, but as a resource to be redirected, that's the true turning point. You begin shaping your garden's future instead of just cleaning up its past. To sum it up, autumn pruning isn't vandalism. It's an act of care. It's your dialogue with the garden, helping it brave the winter and burst into spring full of vigour. So don't fear the pruners, especially when they're in the hands of a thoughtful gardener. Thanks for watching this video all the way to the end. If you found something new and useful, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to our channel so you won't miss our upcoming episodes. Now, a question for you. Which plants do you hesitate to prune in the fall and why? Let us know in the comments below, and let's discuss your biggest gardening fears.